Let's cut out the bullshit for a minute. There are two obvious problems with what has gone on with this test being cancelled.
This is the last knock. My dad refuses to tell me what this means.
The first is COVID, of which, has been a bit of a big deal for some time now. And the second one is that there is too much cricket trying to be fit into a schedule that is already affected by COVID. We just keep jamming things in. We don't cancel things. We postpone them. We move them. Look at this. This was a test series that was jammed up against the IPL, which is jammed up against the World Cup. That means that essentially all three of those tournaments could be affected by this. And that's because we haven't cancelled any of them. And we don't try and cancel any of them. We didn't even try and shorten them. We just keep playing them over and over and over again. And who are the people who are forced to be in these bubbles all the time? There's a few team staff, some coaches, some physios, as we're now hearing more about, but it's mostly the players, and they go from bubble to bubble to bubble. And I talk to players a lot. It's affecting them. A lot of them feel like they're performing for our enjoyment in a way that they never did before. It's not that that wasn't their job. I mean, that is basically what being a professional athlete is. But now they get wheeled around the world into bubbles and they have to fit into all these different regulations. And it's not that much different to everyone else except for the 4-month bubbles and the back-to-back bubbles and the bubbles for bubbles and quarantining before bubbles and all those sorts of things. Can't leave your hotel room. You can't have your normal life. You can't do this. And if they make a mistake, it's a bit different to the rest of us. If one of us makes a mistake at our job, it's a small deal. If you make a mistake that ends up cancelling a test match, that's potentially a £30 million problem. There's more pressure on them. They're not handling it particularly well. Ben Stokes is not the only player that is not handling this well. There's a lot of players out there at the moment who are just not comfortable with everything that is going on. That isn't an Indian cricket thing or an English cricket thing or any. That's pretty much every player I've talked to around the world, from T20 tournaments to everything else. A lot of them want to play. Obviously, they want to get paid. But this is tougher on everyone. And when players don't want to play, we've seen England when it came to South Africa. We've seen India now when it comes to England. If they all speak at once, we kind of have to listen to them at a certain point. Because we're the ones putting them through this. They don't have to be playing cricket now. They started playing cricket because we were bored and we were desperate for sport to come back. And because cricket boards were already letting go so many staff members from around the world. And because sporting bodies in all sports were worried about what TV companies would do if they stopped playing sport. So we've put many of our finest cricket athletes through this unending alternate reality that they have to live in, where any mistake is going to be on the front page of the paper. Have a look at what the Sri Lankan players did. They broke the rules and they were penalised, but look at the penalties that they got for breaking those rules. Now, eventually things have settled down a little bit with what happened to the Sri Lankan cricketers, but they were asked to travel to a country where the COVID rates are still very, very high, stay confined to their hotels, even as the team is falling apart, obviously, from administration all the way through to onto the field. They made some mistakes. Players are going to make mistakes. Waiters have made mistakes. Writers have made mistakes. Politicians have made mistakes. But when it's an athlete, it usually becomes a much bigger deal. And in the Sri Lankan case, it was. And then look at what happened. The overreaction from the Sri Lankan cricket board. They were embarrassed. They thought it might ruin the series. And they came down incredibly hard because of politics as much as anything else. And politics has always played a part in cricket, whether it be local politics like the Sri Lankan government interference through to global cricket politics. For instance, look at the 3 teams that have pulled out of series when the other team wanted to go ahead with them. India pulled out of England, and Australia and England pulled out of South Africa. There's politics in all of those decisions. Remember, it was the West Indies who didn't even have a massive COVID break, who came over to play in England, their men and their women, despite the fact that there were more people getting COVID seemingly every day in England than there were on some of their islands. There's politics in all of this. There's politics with the IPL as well. The IPL is now the biggest thing in cricket and probably has been for quite some time. If you're an Indian player, it's a huge deal. And it's not just your pay. And a lot of people are saying, well, they want to go and play in the IPL. They're probably covered with insurance. It's more to do with the advertisers and all the money they can make around it. the IPL is just a huge payday for players. Now, it's all well and good to say, well, they didn't want to play in the test and they do want to play in the IPL. In work, if you're offered a small amount to do one job and a huge amount to do the other, generally you're going to make sure that you prioritize the one that is going to pay you more. That's a fairly normal thing for most people to want to do. That's not to say that this is just IPL related. This could be they've just had enough. They just want to get out of England. They've been here a very long time. And I'm not going to pretend to have all the facts. And no one really is going to have all the facts. There are some journalists who are better connected, and everyone is going to be spinning this. You're already seeing the jingoistic English fans are spinning it against the IPL. And the jingoistic Indian fans are spinning it against English cricket. Those things, that's just how modern life is now. But realistically, there's going to be a lot of different opinions, and there's going to be a lot of different reasons in that Indian camp why some players did or didn't want to go ahead with this series. For the same reason that Ben Stokes needed a mental health break, and so he pulls out, and other players push through it. Everyone is different. Everyone is motivated by different things. Everyone's in a different mental health position. Everyone's got different family members who have been affected by COVID. I met someone the other day who lived in the UK and has worked in cricket and told me that he doesn't know anyone who had COVID or it had affected their life in any way. That person's going to have a completely different reaction than someone else who's lost family members to COVID. These are all just normal things, but we can't focus on all this because we're cricket fans and we want cricket to be played. And of course, Ravi Shastri's book launch now looks like a monumental mistake, but it doesn't appear like it was actually against the rules of what the ECB and the BCCI have come together, even if neither of those boards are actually particularly happy with that event going ahead. And there was, of course, a time when this test was forfeited or cancelled or whatever the original language was, when it looked like that Ravi Shastri's book launch might be the most expensive in history, around £30 million. That doesn't look like the case anymore. Still doesn't make it a good idea to have the book launch, but, you know, people are doing things. You see people out in the street. As someone who lives in the UK, there's a lot of people vaccinated. So there's a lot of people going about their life absolutely normal. A lot of people on public transport don't wear face masks anymore. There seems to be more touching of things and less washing hands. Like, it is a little bit more relaxed. You could see why the Indian players, who were already incredibly frustrated by what happened in Australia, where they did feel like they were being treated almost like, well, animals in a zoo at times. And they're not the only players to mention that particular phrase. You could see why they might be looking around going, well, why can't we just go out and do this one thing? I mean, we are still living in an incredibly abnormal society right now. It doesn't really matter what country you're in. It is weird at the moment. And people are going to make good decisions and bad decisions. This is a completely fucked up society to try and play international cricket in. I made a video about that like at the start of COVID. It's a very, very hard sport. Internationally, to be able to do this, you've got people away from home in hotel rooms for longer than usual, who have to follow extra rules, who can't always hang out with other people, who can't touch people, who can't just do normal things. I mean, we can't pretend that any of this is normal when India won a test at the Oval while their coach wasn't there because he had this virus. Now, of course, he slightly brought that on himself, but that's the world that we live in, isn't it? And we've all had that. I mean, the test series could have been cancelled at the Oval. I mean, the ICC has been cancelling qualification tournaments at the lower levels. India played 2 teams at the same time because, you know, they felt like they had to. England had to find a complete replacement team at the last minute, like a club 11. This is all weird and it's all terrible. And I know what we want because everyone on this channel is probably a cricket fan and we just want to see the test. But that's not quite the society that we live in. And it's easy to blame the Indian players or the IPL. But we're living in a society where we're asking our athletes to do more than they've ever done before. And some of them don't want to. And if that's because they're putting other jobs ahead of this, that's fair enough. If that's because they're putting their mental health above this, that's fair enough. If that's because they're putting their physical health above this, that's fair enough. If that's just because they've had enough, that's okay. This is all weird, and it's been weird for a very long time, and we're trying to pretend like it's not. So this is a cricket channel, so let's just focus on just cricket for 1 second. There's no saliva on the cricket balls. Like, saliva and cricket balls have gone together pretty much since Fred Spofforth worked out how to swing a cricket ball. That's well over 100 years ago now. This is weird. This is not right, and it hasn't been for a long time. We're trying to fit too much cricket into an abnormal society. And occasionally, things are going to go horribly wrong. And we're all going to blame each other. But essentially, this comes down to 2 things. Cricket boards won't cancel the cricket, and COVID will not go away.